when you did the big formation, the lead airplane only did the aiming, and he became, well, we became a leading crew, so we led a lot of missions, and
some very large missions too, right?
Pardon?
Some very large missions, like the mission that went over the Missouri on the signing of the Japanese surrender.
That's what this picture represents right here. MacArthur signing the instrument. The scripted time for him to sign this was 9:17 a.m. August 2nd. And my target time for bringing the formation over was 9:17. Had a target time just like you were bombing a real target. And the last words of General Ramey to me was, you know who MacArthur was? He said, "That's one target time you better not miss, Vaucher." And I had 525 B-29s, the largest formation of airplanes ever assembled, behind me. It'd be about from here to Newark of airplanes, B-29s.
Wow.
And we went over that right at 9:17, and this is a picture of him signing that. Last year I was out at Pearl Harbor, and I stood right here on the Missouri, and I can't tell you what a strange feeling it was. I'm standing there thinking, on September 2nd at 9:17, I was right up there when MacArthur was signing right here.
Where did you take off from?
Tinian Island. Well, for the whole thing, all the airplanes came from Guam, Tinian, and Saipan. You gotta know a little bit about what a show of force affair is. You know, MacArthur was a traditional Army man, so he was pure Army. When this whole affair came up that he was going to head up the signing of the peace treaty, he said, "How am I going to perform a show of force in Tokyo Bay?" Now, what a show of force for centuries had been, two armies are fighting one another on the ground, and when one won, they would take the defeated army, disarm them, put them at parade rest, and they would parade the winning army in front of them. And the idea was, it was a show of force to show the people who had decided to surrender that we did the right thing, that we could have won against them. So MacArthur wanted a show of force at this ceremony. LeMay, who was head of the 20th Air Force, said, "I'll put up every serviceable B-29 over the battleship Missouri when you sign it." MacArthur said, "That's it." And that's how it came to be. And very few people know that story. I just happened to have been on the right place at the right time to know all the details of it. There were a lot more details to it than that.
Like, how did they coordinate 525, you said?
It's
529.
525?
525. Well, I led the largest combat unit. This was not a combat formation, but I led the largest combat formation of 454 B-29s over the city of Yokohama, and we wiped it out in one mission, wiped out the city, and it was one of the most successful inline bombing missions that was ever performed in the whole war. And how did you coordinate it? Took a lot of doing, because you had some airplanes coming from Guam, some from 100 miles from there, Tinian, and 20 miles from there, some from Saipan. So all those had to take off and arrive here in some kind of order. They couldn't just all arrive at one time.
Yeah.
So headquarters of the 20th Air Force had to plan all this that this unit took off at this time, this unit took off at this time, this unit took off at this time, so they would arrive sequentially. And the important in my part was that I arrived first and assemble a formation. You went around in a circle, you shot flares in the air that were markers, and you also held your, why don't you sit down, Jack, and you get a, anyway, that's a little bit about that signing. The interesting, this decoupage here is really quite an interesting thing. My sister was followed me very closely in she was older than me, but she kept up with me. And she did this decoupage, which shows the Pacific Ocean, the far Pacific, the Philippines, China, Korea, Japan, and the Mariana Islands. If you read this thing here, almost simultaneously with when we started to bomb out of Saipan and Tinian and Guam, Japan, this was in the San Antonio Express, showing where we were coming from and how far it was and how far we could go. It always kind of amazed me that the public knew that much about what was going on, because if we knew it, so did the Japanese.
Right, yeah, that's not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah. This was quite an airplane.
Now, you were the first one to fly that from the factory, right?
Well, you must have been. Did you go to one of my talks?
No, but I try and know a little bit about you first.
Yes. I had been flying combat patrol out of Panama. Panama was a very sensitive target during World War II, because they knew that the Japanese had plans to hit Pearl Harbor, the Panama Canal, and the Philippines, the main base in the Philippines. That was in their plans. They did hit Pearl Harbor and the Philippines, but they never touched Panama. But the thinkers in Washington thought that one of these days they're going to try to pull a sneak attack on the Panama Canal. So we highly protected the Panama Canal, and I flew over 1,000 hours of patrol out of Guam, out of Guatemala, Panama, Peru, and the Galapagos Islands. And Panama is here, and Galapagos Islands over here. And what we did was, from Guatemala up in Central America, we flew a line of patrols here, and we flew a line of patrols from Peru to the Galapagos. So we had these patrols going out like this. This was to keep them from sneaking in from the south, and this was to, if they came up from Pearl Harbor way. And I all of a sudden got called to go to the United States and to a special command and staff school, which was wartime speed. Command and staff school takes a couple of years normally, and this was a 6-week course. And when I finished it, they sent me to Hays, Kansas, and we knew they had a big airplane there. We didn't know what it was. We'd heard of a B-29, but never dreamed of seeing it. And they said, all right, tomorrow morning, we're going to brief you on the airplane you're going to be flying. And about 8 of us pilots walked into this hangar, and here was this B-29. And we'd been flying B-24s and B-17s. We looked at, I can remember to this day, I looked at that and I said, that can't possibly fly that thing. It's too big to fly. And they said they flew it in here. They said it flew very much like a B-26. I don't know if you know what a B-26 is. It was a medium bomber and was kind of a squirrely bomber. It had a lot of unusual names. One was One a Day in Tampa Bay. Another was the Flying Prostitute. Another was the Whore of Baltimore, because it was built in Baltimore. And it killed a lot of people because it was squirrely, but if you knew how to handle it, it wasn't that bad. So they, right on the ground underneath here in the hangar, they said, we're going to send you to B-26 school in Del Rio, Texas, so you'll learn how to fly this airplane, because it flies a lot like the B-26. And so off to Del Rio we went. After a real quick course, I was now a B-26 pilot and now qualified to fly a B-29. And I went back to Hays, Kansas, and in 2 hours and 15 minutes, they checked me out as first pilot. And
Wow.
I got orders to go to Wichita to pick up a B-29, which is where they were being built at that time. And a captain and I was a first lieutenant were sent out and sent over, and a flight engineer, and they had a big ceremony at the factory, because this was the first B-29 that was going into general service. They had made B-29s before, which went into the experimental group, which were sent to Seattle, and where they did all the test flying. So they had a ceremony and broke a bottle of champagne or something on the nose gear, and came time to fly this thing back to Hays. And the captain says, you're first pilot, Vaucher. And I was the first lieutenant at that time. And I said, well, you rank me. He said, no, you got 30 minutes more flying time than I had. He only had an hour and 75 minutes, or an hour and 35 minutes. I had 2 hours and 15 minutes. So I became first pilot. And we got it off the ground, got it to Hays, and then the odyssey of a 2-year odyssey started out for me. From the first 6 months of flying this airplane, when we were trying to learn how to use it, how to fly it, what its capabilities were and were not. And we went through all kinds of things. I had one friend, we were testing it for, this was the first airplane that was pressurized. This was fantastic compared to B-17, B-12, everything else. When you were at altitude, you had all the mass stuff on. And this, you sit in there like you were sitting in your living room. And but that early compression system was a little squirrely. We had to get that corrected. A good friend of mine was up testing pressurization one day, and the next thing you know, he realized that this whole part of the airplane had broken off right here, and they were flying on the way down to the ground, just in this nose piece from here to here. And he told me they got out and they parachuted out just by walking out. The bulkhead just disintegrated. They just walked out the back of the thing, and all these crew people got out. And this thing floated down from here to there and almost made a perfect landing in a Kansas wheat field. It glided down to it didn't crash down like that, but everybody got out on the thing. But we had so many different things. Fires, we had fire after fire. Engine fire I'm talking about.
And how long did this happen? When did they get it straightened out?
There's a whole book written on it. I don't have it down here, called The Battle of Kansas. And it was about a year battle. But the heavy part was from July of 1943, to November of December of February of 1944. At that period of time, and we lost airplanes. We had every kind of accident you could think of. We had. I don't know, some reason or other, number 3 engine was one more apt to catch on fire. And that had, each engine had 4 fire extinguishers. And our procedure was, if you had an engine fire, you pulled 2 of them. And you waited, and if that didn't put it out, you pulled the other 2. But it wasn't working. And once these engines were like nothing that had ever been built before, they, for the first time, were able to build an engine that put out 1 horsepower for every pound of weight. The engine weighed 2,200 horsepower, and the engine put out 2,200 horsepower. And this was, but everything in it was kind of extreme. One of the extremes was they made the crankcase out of magnesium.
Mm-hmm. Ooh.
And we had valve problems. The valves lifted the valves the valve sims lifted the valves for intake and exhaust, gasoline intake and exhaust, and these valves would stick. Once a valve stuck, if it was a intake valve, it would be sucking gasoline in here, but the exhaust wouldn't open, so the gas would accumulate, go down along the cylinder into the crankcase, and finally build up enough to explode. And once that got going, it would get the magnesium engine case going. And you had 3 minutes to get out of the airplane. Once that magnesium started going, that wing would come off in 3 minutes.
Wow.
So you had to be on the ball there. I modified the whole system of controlling fires. I had a fire in number 3 engine, and when it took place, it shook the whole airplane. I mean, it woke everybody up. When I say wake up, when you're flying a 10-hour mission, there's a lot of sleeping goes on in between. When this thing exploded, the flight engineer mistakenly pulled all 4 fire extinguishers. He was only supposed to pull 2 and then wait and pull the other 2. He pulled all 4 and it put out the fire. So that became the standard procedure after that. That's how you learn.
Wow, yeah.
By experience. But that whole experience of testing that airplane was, you just never knew what the hell was going to happen.
And it must have been scary, as you're one of the first ones flying it. There's only a few test pilots like you that have flown it.
Yeah.
And it's brand new, and you're out there and just seeing what a new airplane is like.
Yeah. I was telling that to some airline people just recently that were present, and they said, "You mean you only had 2 hours and 15 minutes in that airplane, and you were a command pilot? I said, well, you had to be. You were in a left seat. But anyway,
Wow.
these are, I don't know whether, did I show you this one? This was a pointy, pointy talkie. And this everybody carried this in their vest pocket when we were flying from India to China. That's not on that map. Well, we were stationed right up in here in China. We were 1,000 miles inland. We went through several different countries and a lot of different dialects. The Chinese had different dialects from New Jersey was different than Pennsylvania, was different than Massachusetts. They all had their own dialects. So this book has a whole bunch of dialects in it. So on this page 50 it says, please tell the nearest guerrilla or Chinese troops that I am here. And that's what that says in that particular dialect. And over here, it gives what their answer might be, and you'd hope you'd be able to just make out. Don't know where they are, can't get in touch with them. But this was your pointy talkie that you carried with you, so you could, if you had trouble, had to rely on local people.
Was that something for the Hump campaign?
Yeah, that's a hump. All hump pilots
hump.
carry that.
A pointy talkie.
Walkie-talkie.
Walkie-talkie.
Pointy-talkie. Pointy. You point.
Right.
You point to him, and he looks at. You assume that he can read that Chinese.
Which some of them can.
Which some of them can.
Yeah.
Which we found out later. We had crews that got shot down over the hump, which is back here. I mean, shot down. I don't think any of them were ever shot down. Weather put them down, or some engine trouble, and there was no place to land, no airports. It was 1,200 miles of nothing but mountains just like this. I got a good picture of it somewhere. I don't have it out here, huh? Picture of the hump. But anyway, where were we now?
You had just finished talking about the pointy talkie
Oh,
at the Hump.
okay, well, this is I'll come back to that. These are commendations. This is the Aviation Hall of Fame, which Jack belongs to, was installed in.
Yes.
And this is a commendation from the Congress, United States Congress. This is from the Congressional Record. And this is the proclamation of the town, which is all about my local doings. And this is a certificate that I am now a nominee for the National Hall of Fame. And I suspect if I don't make it this year, I was the nominee last year, I will probably never make it. Never make it. This book here is my significant other, Donald Lazardic, made this for me, and it's really a personal history, and you can learn all about me from this thing, who my ancestors were. There's my uncle, there's my grandfather from Switzerland, all my early family, and then it's divided up into sections. That's getting started, and it has a whole section on my aviation time, And then it has a final section, which is my life after the war, my family life.
Wow.
So
What a beautiful gift.
that is a marvelous thing. All these, some of these
Oh.
pictures here. You will like some of these pictures. Oh, there's that picture up there. All of these you actually see in here, Miss Lace. That is to me, one of the most interesting pictures I have. On the first raid to the empire, Japan was called the Empire. On the first raid to the empire, we were briefed in China, this is in China, in Chengdu, China, for that mission. And we had no idea what kind of opposition we were going to get in the empire. There were all kinds of projections that they had pulled in airplanes from all over the Pacific and were defending the homeland like they never ever defended before. And all the top anti-aircraft was in there, had been pulled in. So we had unusual expectations for what was going to happen. And this is a briefing for that mission. I happen to be sitting right over here. Unfortunately, I'm not in the picture. I know all those people. But you can see the anxiety in their face. It's really quite they're looking at a briefing officer telling them what the route is going to be and how high they're going to be flying and what kind of opposition we expect. And so they're listening to the briefing officer, and they're listening intently, intently.
So what did they think back then? I mean, I know this was kamikaze era.
Oh yeah, with kamikaze.
And they're defending the homeland. What sorts of rumors were going around as to what you might face?
Oh, all kinds of speculation. It was all speculation. Because nobody, other than Doolittle, which 2 years before that,
Right.
had gone over in an unusual kind of bombing mission. But that was just a little prick, in the side, and it was under unusual circumstances. This is after they felt that Japan was getting ready for an assault on their homeland, and they had done all kinds of things. We had pretty good connections, you know.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the Russians had an embassy there. The Swedes had an embassy there during all the war. They weren't at war with Japan, so there was some traffic in between, verbal traffic of what on the ground people saw was happening. It was probably fourth or fifth hand by the time it got back to the United States, but at least
You still had something.
it was something.
It must have been scary.
But there's my crew.
I'm going to take a still shot of that.
And that and as commander, I'm standing way over there. That's my bombardier. This was a publicity shot. We were now a lead crew, and the lead crew's primary guy was the bombardier. So that's the reason he's up front.
Oh, the pilots were just the bus drivers.
Yeah, I was the bus driver.
Back then they figured, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
You can see the destruction of. That's the Naval Air Station after the Navy struck it. It's pretty well leveled out.
Yeah.
You see a swimming pool and I should say Naval College. They're in Annapolis. Now outside of Tokyo, it was peaceful looking as you could be. I took these pictures. After the flight over the Missouri, we broke off. Everybody went home on their own. We broke off and I toured all around Tokyo and at low altitude. And we took a lot of these pictures. But you can see it. It looks like one of our countryside. See all the fields and
the squares and everything.
squares and everything. And you'd never know that 64 square miles of Tokyo look like this. 64 square miles. Destruction of it.
Have you been back to Tokyo?
No, I never had. Look at that picture. I had a bias for a long time. I didn't get rid of my bias about the Japanese until about 10 or 15 years ago, and I began to sober up, and part of it was, you've heard of Tokyo Rose?
Yes.
Tokyo Rose broadcast every night to all the troops, all over the Pacific. Played American music and told about what was going on in Los Angeles and New York, and had news, and also would allude to actual units. And one night she declared that a group had been convicted of murder, and if they ever got shot down, they were going to be beheaded. And I was one of them, because I was an operations officer. I was the director of operations. But later, that briefing you took that I showed you, I later read those briefings as I got promoted up to be a colonel. And 5 of us, they named 5 people, all 5 I knew. One of them was me. And that if we ever got shot down, we would be beheaded because we'd been convicted in absentia for murder, for directing these operations. So for a long time, I thought the Japanese should apologize for that. And then I finally decided, hell, war is over and there's no need to. But I had a pretty strong bias for quite a while.
Well, that's a pretty good reason.
To
be a little weird.
Oh, that's a picture of the
flyover?
of the Missouri, yeah. Oh, there I am. If that was the lead group, this was taken from a newsreel. There I am leading this thing at 9:17.
Wow. I'll come back and take some close-up shots. Wow.
That's what we did this flyover at low altitude. I think we were at 1,500 feet. That's some B-29s behind me, actually. Anyway, that's my little gallery.
It's a fantastic gallery.
One picture I wanted to show you. Oh, that one right up there.
Okay.
That was a painting by one of our crew members. And that looks so typical. You see all the B-29s back there, and see we were right in the middle of nowhere. They built an airfield. There were shacks like that around.
Farm animals nearby,
Yeah.
and just fields.
Yeah, animals loose like that. Cows, you probably know India reveres cows.
Mm-hmm.
And you better not get mixed up with a cow. You better not run over one. You're in trouble, big trouble. There's one thing here, you as a flyer, I want to show you. You appreciate this. That's just another picture of destruction. But Jack, you ought to see this.
Oh, wow.
Jack,
Jack?
bring it to him. Bob wants to show you a picture, Jack. Bob wants to show you a picture.
Okay, right here.
So far, it's not 3 o'clock yet.
What was a dear friend of mine, who is dead now, he was born up on Lake Cayuga in the Finger Lakes.
Uh-huh.
And his father had a grocery store on Lake Cayuga. And Curtis, was building flying machines at the same time Wright was. They had a big argument who developed the aileron. Curtis claimed he did, and Wright, I don't know how that lawsuit ever came out. It was a lawsuit that was in court for years. But his father, Curtis, had built this airplane, and they were going to take it off, and he made a postcard of this, and he sold them as postcards at his grocery store. But that's about 1912.
Was that a Wright?
No, it's a Curtis.
Curtis?
If there ever was a Curtis, this is one that Curtis built himself. Curtis was really quite an ingenious guy himself.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Is that what they call a Curtis pusher or not?
Yeah.
Is that the Curtis
push.
push? The Curtis pusher?
Curtis what?
Pusher. He's a Curtis.
Well, it is a pusher. I don't know.
If it's
But-
yeah.
But it says on the back here,
Oh,
it says that they never took it off there. The water was too rough, and they carted the thing over to another lake where the water was smoother, and did take it off. And then, if you ever have an opportunity, you should take it. The Curtis Museum is at the head of one of these lakes. Have you been there?
no, he has.
That's a very interesting because it's just Curtis stuff, and it's amazing all the stuff he did. And the Curtis Museum is. But going from 1912 to 1942 to this was quite an achievement. Of course, you guys now you've jumped way beyond all this with jets, way beyond that. But I've done everything except do loops or rolls in that.
And that's probably a good thing.
Yeah. Very maneuverable airplane and a very sturdy airplane. Built like,
It's on it.
oh,
Oh, yeah.
the wings. Those wings were given to me by Chiang Kai-shek, who was Emperor of China.
Really?
And when the war ended, he said, I'm going to have a pair of wings cast for all the pilots that flew for China. And they considered us flying for China since we were stationed in China. As a matter of fact, you can't believe, some of those books have pictures in it that
Wow.
to build a runway good enough for B-29, Jack, have a seat. To build runways for B-29s, you had to have a base about this thick. You dug down that deep, and you put stone down and various degrees of stone. To do that in China, at Xingtu, where I was stationed.
Yeah, we went to Chengdu.
You went to Xingtu? Oh, that was just a little village.
We went to Stillwell's home.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I'll be darned. To build this airport that I flew out of, I was there after it had been partially established. They had to bring up stones, big boulders like this from the river that was nearby. And they carted them up, pulled them up on a ox-drawn cart, dumped them in piles, and then they would take and reduce these big stones down to small stones, which would go down in the base of this big trench that they had dug by hand. And a B-29 runway was at least from here to the other side of that pool. And you dig it that deep, and dig it all by hand, and take it all out by ox cart. There's some operation. We had 92,000 coolies on the field at one time. 92,000.
We're making runways.
Working at various aspects of building revetments. We put our airplanes in revetments. We didn't have hangars. And you probably don't know what a revetment is.
Well, I think revetment is sloped. It's like a hill with a cutout to put the airplane in.
Yeah,
Is that?
it was to reduce the possibility for fighters to come over and strafe and ruin an airplane because it was standing up on the ground.
Right.
It was covered, it had just embankments on each side of it.
Yeah.
So it's in here. Now, it had to be open on this side to come in and out. So if they straight from this side, it didn't do anything, but it protected it from three sides. But they would take this pile of big rocks, and people would hammer them down into smaller stones. They'd take the smaller stones, go over there to a pile, and they would be from here to, well, a half a mile from here. Chinese groups working around piles of stone, breaking them up into pieces. Some broke them up into this piece, and some broke them up into this piece. And then on the fine gravel you had on top, you had people chipping away, making little fine stuff. And it'd be whole families, a grandmother, grandfather, little children, grown-ups. This whole clan would be together. There'd be a clan from here. They'd be from here to the piano apart. At noontime, a cart would come down the middle of all this, and every one of these families had a flag up here like this. And that flag had numbers on it indicating how many mouths it fed. This cart would come along, and it was loose rice, and the cart driver would signal that family, okay, your turn. The lead guy or lead person from that group would come over with a basket, and he'd look at the flag, and he would dip out rice according to the number of mouths in that family. That was their pay for the day, food in the form of rice. It was, and here you see that does it say it on here? Yeah. That one doesn't say it, Hellbirds. We were called the Hellbird. Our group was called the Hellbird group. I'll be damned, I don't have a Hellbird group on there. And the reason we were called the Hellbird group, the Chinese said we were birds from hell. These were birds from hell. So
Yeah.
we named it the Hellbird group. I took the first combat airplane into combat with radar. And this is the keys to the airplane. Once you got in combat, you opened up everything and left them open. You never used
Right.
the keys again. So that's the reason. But this was a British LB-30, number 543. 543. Yeah, I should. God.
Somebody's probably still at the hangar looking for those. That airplane sitting parked.
Yeah. Anyway, any questions?
You said that was the first plane with radar?
Oh, yeah, that was the first plane with radar in
Right.
combat.
And what year was that?
1943, 42. It was March of 1942.
And where
And
were you?
the British had radar, but we didn't have it on our airplanes.
And then the Germans eventually had it
The
too.
Germans had it, and I picked up that airplane. This is a good one for you. At Wright Field, I was sent to Wright Field out of nowhere. I arrived on an assignment in Pendleton, Oregon on Saturday night. On Sunday morning, I was transferred all the way back to Wright Field from Pendleton, Oregon. And I was put on a special, this is unbelievable, a special DC-3 came in and picked me up from United Airlines and took me and several other crew members to Wright Field, Ohio, and for a special assignment. And that was to take 3 of these airplanes to Java to do night search. The Japanese were playing havoc with us with their battles, with their ships, their military ships plying around the Java Sea. And anyway, arrived at Wright Field and checked in, and they said, oh, you guys are here to take these airplanes. We're not finished with them. And they had a group of guys in shirt sleeves like this from MIT administering the whole thing, putting this radar on. They put big antennas, just like we used to put on our roof, you know, the one. We had them hanging down here underneath the airplane. They installed these, and I'd never heard of radar. But more important is, I'd never heard of an LB-30 airplane.
Either, right. Yeah.
4-engine airplane. And I wasn't even checked out on the B-17 yet. And the crew members, they'd assembled gunners and navigators and flight engineers and all that. I was made commander of a flight of 3 LB-30s. They're going to go over. And I'm just a second lieutenant, but I've got a lot of time. I've been in the Air Force a year. And I would say everybody that was with me had just been either just enlisted within the last 6 months or just been conscripted, like gunners and so forth.
So you had over 50 weeks of experience.
Yeah. Or putting it in days, it makes it seem longer.
Yeah.